Hello and welcome everyone. Just to let you know, typically in these webinars, I leave everybody on silent. This one is really all about you and getting yourself out there and publishing. And what I'm seeing is we have graduates. So I'm going to start going through and I'm going to start unmuting all of you. So as I'm unmuting you, if you're somewhere where there is noise, you now have control over your mute and unmute mode. So I'm going to ask you to mute yourself. Renee, for example, I'm going to ask you to mute yourself because I'm getting feedback and lots of background noise. And what we want to do is give you the control over whether or not you're coming in live and participating, asking questions, commenting, etc. So what is our topic of conversation today? We are talking about getting published. The agenda that we've got for you, let's see, let me get some more people unmuted here. Renee, if you could mute yourself, I'd rather let you have control than me have to mute you. Hi, Sam.
The lady I pushed. Okay. Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Great. And you too?
You are unmuted. Our goal is to have everybody live for this conversation so that you all have a chance to jump in with your questions, etc. So I've got, let's see, I've got most of you unmuted, and then we want to give you control. Renee, I'm going to go ahead and mute you again because that's where I'm getting the background from, and when you're ready to be unmuted, just let me know. Okay, so the agenda for the conversation today. And Kat, can you do me a favor and mute yourself? Sorry. Yeah, no, that's okay. We've got feedback coming from you. So I want you all to be able to mute yourselves, and that way you can unmute. So Kat, I'll go ahead and get you muted right now. The idea is that you manage the background. If I'm hearing it from you, I'm going to mute you. If I've got you muted and you want to come on live, type in the question panel or raise your hand. We'll just do it that way. Okay, so we're going to talk about reasons for getting published. We'll talk about actually doing the writing for publication. We'll discuss places to get published, how to get published, and resources for that. And then, of course, we want time for that Q&A. So diving in, first off, what are the reasons for getting published? And I'd like to hear from you. Those of you that are live, what do you think the reasons are for getting published?
Gain credibility.
Yes, credibility. Good. What else, everyone? Lots of quiet out there. Okay. So let me throw out a few and see if you want to add to this list. You're demonstrating your expertise when you get published. It gives you a book to sell. It's a learning process. And then, yes, the credibility. What else do you all think? Hey, Mike, how you doing? Mike, just
Doing
doing good.
Yeah.
I wanted to let you know we're picking up sound, so I'm ideally leaving you unmuted, and if you want, you can mute yourself. All right, everyone. So more reasons for getting published. The process of publishing is a fabulous learning opportunity. And that happens in a couple of ways. Perhaps you've heard that one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it. And writing it is a way of teaching it. So you're learning when you're doing the writing. It's obviously a great way to develop your writing skills, which is something you'll use in so many different areas. And it's a way to create content to repurpose, because when you write for publication, you're setting yourself up, okay, now I can use pieces of this for blogs, in social media, etc. What else is coming up for all of you? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave you all muted. getting too much sound, feedback from people, and without having you jump in with responses, it's making it more challenging than the benefit. What I'm going to ask you to do is, if you do want to share and come on live, please raise your hand or type in the question panel so we can do that. Obviously, it's so much more fun, especially on a conversation like this, to get all of you involved. Okay, so let's continue forward. Let's talk about actually writing for publication. This is one of the big challenge areas. So the first thing that happens is you sit down with that blank piece of paper and you go, okay, what am I going to write about? And you're wondering, you're thinking, you're going, okay, what are the possibilities there? So let's talk about this, for example. When you think about yourself as a coach and you think about putting yourself out there as a coach, one of the things we talk about there is your niche area. What type of coaching specifically do you do? Now, occasionally I'll have somebody say to me, well, I do executive coaching and business coaching and career coaching and life coaching. And it's like, okay, you're not telling me what kind of coaching you're doing. All you're doing is saying, oh, gee, I coach everybody. I coach the whole world. And it comes across as being a jack of all trades and a master of none. So the reason we define our niche is because you're more credible. When you say, for example, I coach executives in terms of their leadership style, or I coach managers on how to effectively engage employees and increase productivity. Now you're starting to be specific. You're defining your niche for your coaching. Writing for publication is going to be much the same idea. And given that you're a coach and you're putting yourself out there as a coach and offering coaching services, it makes the most sense for you to tie your writing to the type of coaching you're doing. So you've already explored your niche areas. You've been thinking about that, thinking about how you're presenting yourself. Based on that, choose what you're going to write about. Because ultimately, going back to, if you're demonstrating expertise, developing your credibility, etc., when your topic, subject matter for your writing is tied to what it is you do and where you want that expertise recognized, it simply makes sense. You're getting bang for your buck. So when you sit down to write, think about who your clients are, what their challenges are, what they want to address. Think about your niche area, your focus in the work that you do, and pull your idea from there. Now, another big thing that we find happens for people is actually doing the writing. Oh, it's so hard to, to sit down and, I sit there and I stare at the paper and what do I, okay, let's go past that. First thing I want to say, and I think this is very freeing, sometimes people have the idea that they're supposed to write the first paragraph first, the first chapter first, etc. And the reality is, it doesn't matter. Maybe you start in the middle, maybe you start at the end, maybe you start at the beginning. Wherever you start, that's okay. So the idea is, whatever thought you're having, whatever ideas are running around in your head, start writing them. The great thing about technology today is you're probably putting it on a computer, which means it's super easy to cut and paste. Oh, well, let's see, I wrote this first and I want to move it over here and move it there. And you can do that so easily. So whatever is running through your head when you're writing about that, you're more energized about your writing, you're more engaged in what you're writing, and it's easier to get that information out and on paper. And I'm hoping everyone, if you have comments, questions, type them in or raise your hand and I'll unmute you individually, because we really do want to hear from you and engage you in this conversation. I will continue while I'm waiting, hopefully, for people to type in questions or raise hands, that kind of thing. So writing for publication, continuing on that. Your next step, once you start playing with your idea and doing some writing, is the decision to actually commit. And this happens whether you're deciding to have a blog, because when you start a blog, it is a commitment. You want to be consistently posting on there. Otherwise, it looks like you're starting something and not following through. So when you're going to write for publication, it is a decision to commit. If you're writing a book, that's a process over time. So think about that. Think about what that means to you and be intentional with it. Have time available to yourself. No, okay, on these days, at these times, however you function, you're dedicating the time and the energy to doing that writing. Now, sometimes a working title for what you're writing is your starting point, and sometimes you come up with a title after you start some writing. So I'll give you an example. One of the things we do, of course, is publish a book once a year, and the chapters are written by graduates of the program. And I know I've got a couple of you here that have written chapters for books. And one of the things we ask you to do is give us a working title and your teaching points. The reason we call it a working title is we know it may change. The idea is to, more than anything, have a sense of content areas for different people to make sure that in any one book we're avoiding duplication, and that's all. When you're writing your own book, your own blog or article or white paper, whatever it is, it may help you to have a working title, a sense of, okay, this is generally, and be flexible with it. Change it. If something comes up and you're going, okay, wait a minute, I'm going totally a different direction as I start writing, whatever that is, that's okay. And it may be you start out, okay, here's key, very big picture overview, where I'm going to go in terms of the content or the teaching points. The real message out of that is this. When you're writing for the reader. What do they want out of this? And so when you think about your teaching points, you're focused on actually providing valuable content. That's the reason for the word teaching in there. Now, of course, another big consideration is formatting. The bottom line is this: when you start putting things out, if, for example, you have a book and every chapter in the book uses a different font style or size, or gee, in this chapter I indent my paragraphs and that one I don't, this chapter is double spaced, that one's single spaced, etc., it simply looks unprofessional. Now, what that means to you individually is, if you're writing your own book, you're writing a white paper, etc., decide what your formatting is going to be and be consistent with it. That includes things like punctuation. So I'll give you an example. When we write the book, we say 2 spaces between sentences. Now that sounds like, oh, well, you know, who cares? It doesn't really matter. When you print the book, it speaks to professionalism, and that in turn speaks to credibility. So it's okay for people to write a book with 1 sentence between, and in the reason we ask for 2 spaces is, number one, we want to be consistent. That's the single most important thing. We want everybody doing the same thing. And then number 2, we choose 2 spaces. It's one of the accepted standards, and generally speaking, it's easier to read. So that's the reason we do it that way. Is it okay in your own book to be different? Of course it is. So Samson, great question. Samson is asking, or maybe it's Carol, I know you're both there together, for blogs, what's the advice on length and frequency of publication? So here's what I'll share with you. I have seen different experts say different things on length. I have seen 200 to 300 words, and I have seen 200 to 600 words as an example. I personally target 200 to 300 words. There are different experts that have different numbers there. The reason I go with that is I believe that when people look at a blog, they want to be able to read it fast, and then they want to move on. And so if it's super long, I feel like I'm going to lose some people. So I'm going with that. In terms of frequency, when I first started, for the first, I want to say 6 or 7 years, I was writing 3 blog posts a week. What I have since learned, and actually Ellen's on the call and helped me with this, is that best practice is saying twice a week is plenty. So twice a week, 200 to 300 words. That's the standard I'm using, so I hope that's helpful to you on there. Okay, and I think I'm good on those questions, so I'm going to keep going. Next, writing for publication. Get feedback. Yeah, Ellen, Ellen gave us a comment, Samson. She said, anything longer than 300 words is an article, not a blog. Agreed, definitely agreed on that one. All right, so feedback. You want people reading it and you want them telling their perception, what they think, how they are taking what you're putting out there. And this is incredibly valuable in a couple of ways. Number one, the languaging you're using, the focus of your information, is that something they care about, they're interested in, etc. And then number two, get feedback on your formatting. It's after a while, my eyes get so blurry, I have a hard time seeing periods and commas and that kind of thing. So it's like, okay, somebody else look at this for me. I'm not seeing it anymore. So when you share that with other people, you're improving what you got. Now, I'll give you an example for what we do at the Center for Coaching Certification. When we publish our book, we put you in a team. And we have teams of 4 or 5 people. And we have you on a schedule where you will share your draft with somebody else on the team. They have some time to give you feedback on it. You make changes and then you share it with somebody else. And it's a fabulous process because everybody has different perspectives. Feedback like, hey, put a story in here, make it personal, make it real. Gosh, you're off track on your formatting. Hey, I'm really missing information on this. I feel like you gave me half the story, et cetera, et cetera. So it's great in terms of really improving your writing. Now, sometimes I have people that are hesitant to give that feedback. And here's what I'll share with you. When you ask somebody to give you feedback, I say to people, please, please be brutal. Because the more brutal you are, the more I'm going to improve what I'm writing. And I really want that blunt, brutal feedback so it's a better product in the end. Now, when you get to that final draft and editing stage, some of you are really great at writing and some of you are going, that's just not my skill set, and that's okay. So who is really good at that final draft and editing? And there's, interestingly enough, to me, 2 different pieces to this. One of it is the languaging, the content, how you're saying what you're saying. And the other side of it is the actual formatting, the punctuation, the spacing, et cetera, et cetera. So expertise in those areas is typically different. Be aware of that. So you want somebody with some insight and understanding around your subject matter, and you want somebody with expertise in terms of grammar, spelling, punctuation, etc. Then, of course, when you go to publish, you will find for publication, there are standards. Now, obviously, it's far more liberal if you're simply posting an article online or publishing a blog, that kind of thing. When you start moving into the books, it gets a lot stricter in terms of the guidelines. And it goes back to, hey, this is something that's being printed, put out there, etc. So very important to be prepared for that. The biggest example I can give you is back to the book we do each year. Sometimes, one person's using little round circle bullets and somebody else is numbering and somebody else is indenting, etc. You know what? If we put it out that way, what's the perception of the reader when they get a copy of the book? They're like, oh, this is really ad hoc. They're not paying attention to what they're doing. So for publication, you want the quality of the content and the professionalism in that formatting. Okay. Now, a big piece is once you do publish a book, and of course I'm speaking to the book versus the blog, this is also going to be true, by the way, for white papers, etc. It's about promoting it and selling it. Now, what's interesting to me is I used to think that if you had a real publisher publish your book for you, they took care of the marketing. And the reality is that's typically not the case anymore. I actually got recruited to write a book by a really well-known publisher. And then as we're getting into this, it turns out they want me to be the one doing the marketing. And I'm like, okay, so why am I going with a publisher here? If I have to write it and then I have to be the one doing the marketing, what's the point of having a publisher? You're taking away a huge chunk of what I can sell this for. And the publisher literally said, well, that's the direction publishing houses are going. We've decided to go that direction. We recognize that's different than what we said when we contracted with you, and we're happy to let you out of the contract. It's like, okay. So I was very surprised by that. I'm not sure what experience some of you have. It's, especially when you're first getting started, there is an expectation by not all, most publishers, that you're going to do a lot of the marketing. Now, of course, when you self-publish, you expect that. That's coming. So in terms of promoting it and marketing, how do you do that? Well, you have a website, so you make it available on your website. The added benefit, by the way, of doing that is your credibility. You're demonstrating your expertise. Back to the reasons for writing in the first place. Another great way to get that book out there and sell it is by speaking. Now, in coaching, what we know is this: the two single best sources of new coaching clients are referrals and speaking or training. When you are speaking or training, if you have a book at the back of the room with your name on the cover, that adds a lot of credibility. Are you going to get rich off that book? No, probably not. You'll make a few dollars each time a book sells. Are you going to gain credibility? Yes, in a big way. So having it on your website, putting it out on social media, including it in emails, and then, of course, anytime you're out and about. Those are all ways you're doing that. So far, silence on your part. I'm not seeing any more questions or hands raised, so I'm continuing on. In terms of places to get published, you got a couple of options. Of course, graduates of the Center for Coaching Certification have the option of writing a chapter for Coaching Perspectives. We do make that a one-time opportunity. We have a lot of graduates. What we do is when we publish the book, in the copyright itself, we literally grant full rights of individual chapters back to the individual authors. The intention is that you now can take your content that you wrote and you can repurpose it. You can put it on a blog, you can parlay it into a full book on that topic, whatever you want. And we're very, very intentional about that, because the whole reason for putting a book out each year is to support you being a published author. That's really end all be all for us. Now, you can self-publish. It's pretty easy. Essentially, that's what we do at the Center for Coaching Certification. So when I say self-publish, there's actually a couple of different resources for self-publishing. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. Please note there are more. Amazon owns what's called CreateSpace. What's nice about CreateSpace is it does immediately get you out there on Amazon, etc. They have everything there in terms of your formatting guidelines, documents, etc. So it does help you in that regard, and you can self-publish. They even have designer tools for your covers, etc. So that's a way you can do it. Another example, and again, there are many self-publishing avenues. Another one is a company called Lulu, where you can upload your book and publish it. A few more bells and whistles available on Amazon. Now, let me give you an additional note. If you publish through something like CreateSpace or many of these others, they do have services for sale. So they will actually sell you editing, formatting, etc. services. And there's pros and cons. If you don't have the skill set yourself or somebody that can do that really well for you, it can make sense. At the same time, you're paying somebody else for that, and that's out-of-pocket expense. So it's a consideration for you. Now, another option along this line is there are a number of famous people that put out books, and what they do is literally sell you the opportunity to write a chapter for their book. And in a case like that, they're going to handle the editing and those kinds of things for you. Prices are all over the board, typically $1,000 or more from what I've seen. You know, like Brian Tracy, Ken Blanchard, some of those, they will do that. Jack Canfield's a big one for that. And it's, you know, people do it because it's, oh yeah, I get to say, you know, I co-authored a book with Jack Canfield. And, oh wow, that's so cool. So it's an option. There are some benefits to it. At the same time, it's an awareness as far as that goes. Okay, so another good question here. How soon after a book is published do you want to revise it? You know, here's what I'm going to say. It depends on what you're doing. So, for example, with the Coaching Perspective series, we don't do revisions. We simply, every year is a brand new book, brand new content, etc. If the content of your book is something that, you know, people will go back to that and buy it again and again over time, then it can make sense to go back and do revisions. So there's a big difference between putting out new content and updating something. The updates, I think, is very common in something like a textbook because it's going to be core content that will remain the same, and the updates will be significant and important. So my question to you is really, what is the reason for revising a publication versus going out and doing a new one? Because sometimes the time and the effort into that can be pretty similar. So good question. I think the answer is going to vary depending on what your reason for doing it is. All right, so places to get published. Of course, whether you want to do a book or anything else, publishers, newspapers, magazines, blogs, what are you doing? Well, bottom line, it means you got to go out and find them. And then you got to submit things and get it out there. So there are a ton of these. There are lots of publishers out there, newspapers all over the place, magazines, blogs, etc. So a lot of opportunities in terms of places. Standards, process, etc. varies based on each of them. So that's going to be different. Now, let's talk about how. So, for example, if you decide you want to write a chapter in Coaching Perspectives, if you haven't done that yet, it's pretty easy. You just email me. I have a form I send you. It's an agreement. It gives you the timeline for the process, and it gives you the formatting guidelines. So that's available to you, and you can do that as a graduate. That's a one-time opportunity. Now, if you decide to self-publish, you're going to do the writing. You're going to either pay somebody to do formatting and setup, or you're going to be following guidelines that are provided. And it's literally, when the time comes, it's pushing a button and going, yeah, publish. So it's pretty simple. Let's see, another question. Are Kindle online publications good for a first book? So for example, in CreateSpace, where you're self-publishing, people can order a print copy. They can order one copy at a time. So it's only printed when somebody orders the book. And so that's a nice way to do that. And they give you the option of also making it available on Kindle. On the pro side of being on Kindle, there's a lot of people do it. You'll have more people that will access your book than ordering print copies, etc. On the con side, typically the price point is a little bit less. With the Coaching Perspectives book that we put out, you know, I personally lose money on that because of how much I invest in getting the book out, etc. So I don't really care if it sells for less on Kindle. The intention behind getting that book out there is demonstrating expertise. If you're doing it to make money, it's simply a consideration for you. You got to decide, hey, is it worth doing that? If you can put it out at the same price point on Kindle, where you'll sell fewer of them at the same time because you're avoiding the cost of the printing, etc. You'll make a few more dollars. Or you can put it at the price less the cost of the printing and break even on it. So you've got options. If your intention is to get visible, demonstrate expertise, and build that credibility, yeah, put it on Kindle. It makes a lot of sense. Okay. If you are going to pay to be included with somebody like Jack Canfield or that kind of thing, you find the opportunities. And yes, that's some online research typically. You apply to be part of the process, you pay the fee, and then you follow steps they give you, whatever that is. Now, if you decide to go out to a publisher for a book, you're going to be doing some research. Now, when you research publishers, pay attention to what kind of books they publish. For example, I have a sister who's written dozens of books, and they're very specific in terms of, she writes about farming, farm animals, crops, etc. Well, there are a lot of publishers that just don't care about that. That's not what they do. Alternatively, there are publishers that are all about children's books. Now, are those publishers the ones you want to go to with a book on coaching? No, it's a different kind of focus. So when you look for a publisher, look for a publisher that puts out the type of book you're writing. They do have specialty areas for that, and they have guidelines in terms of submitting a book to them. So you got to read what that is, how their process works, and follow that. Newspapers can be a little bit easier. Newspapers around the country now, of course, there's a lot fewer of them now than there used to be. At the same time, very often they look for great content. Keep in mind when you submit to a newspaper, if something big is happening in the news, your article goes by the wayside. At the same time, if you don't care about the date of publication, you can submit it. They can use it whenever they want. When it's a slow news day, that's when you get printed. Again, they're going to have processes. If you're going to go after newspapers, I'm going to say think about where your clients are and what they read and choose based on that. Does it make sense? Magazines is going to be the same thing as what we're saying for both publishers and newspapers. You know, if it's a magazine about home decor, they probably are not that interested in a write-up on executive coaching or something like that. So finding a magazine that cares about your subject matter and that your ideal client is likely to be reading is going to make the most sense. Now, in terms of blogs, you've got a couple of options. You can guest blog or you can write your own. So I'll give you an example. Actually, Beth's on the call here. She just did a guest blog with me. And what's great about that for Beth is, in addition to sharing that with someone else, getting feedback on it, what it means is when I publish her blog on our blog, there's going to be a link back to Beth's website. So that's a way of her gaining visibility beyond her own readership. So she's what we call a guest blogger. It's the Center for Coaching Certification blog. Beth's article is going to be there. The other option, of course, with blogging is you can set up your own. If you have a website, or actually sometimes the blog becomes the website, it's a great way of really getting yourself out there and starting to build that audience and that following. Both of them have pros. It's definitely worth doing both. Think about that, because blogging is something, you know, hey, I can send this article to somebody else and then I can still use it on my own blog. I can say, hey, here's the blog I wrote for example, with Beth, after it shows up on our site, she can say, hey, here's the blog I wrote for the Center for Coaching Certification, and she can republish it on her own site, at the same time gaining additional credibility. Yeah, it's already published out there. So that's a good thing, in addition to being an inbound link to you. Online, there are places like eZine, places where you can submit articles. Some of them actually have a human being read what you're submitting before it goes live. Others, it's an automated process and the content quality is less. Be picky. So if you're going to put it out somewhere, you want it to be a place where it's more credible. Another example for this kind of thing is on LinkedIn. A lot of people post articles there. And that social media site is a great place in terms of having people see that getting found there. So a lot of different places as far as that goes. Let's continue on. When you publish, it's really important to have completely original and unpublished content. Now, I'll give you an example. When we do the books, Coaching Perspective, sometimes I have people who are writing a chapter and they want to start citing sources. Well, the first challenge is this. When you cite a source, that's somebody else's content. Legally speaking, you've got to have their written permission to use their content in your publication because you are publishing something that's going to be out there. They own the copyright on it. So that's a drawback, number one, because you got to go through those hoops. The other thing is this. Are you looking to build your credibility, demonstrate your expertise, or are you wanting to show off someone else's? So if you want to show off someone else's, yeah, then you cite all these resources and it basically becomes a research paper. If you want to demonstrate your own expertise, original content simply makes sense because then it's about your knowledge base. Now, one thing that we do, and I definitely recommend it, if you're going to publish something, especially a book, white paper, that kind of thing, run a plagiarism check. So, for example, there's a site called Authenticate, and there are others that you can use. And here's what's interesting. Think about it this way. Coaching is a topic that's been around. A lot of people are writing about it, that kind of thing. Whatever you write, it's very possible that someone essentially wrote the same thing, even though you didn't know it. And if you say, oh, well, it was original to me, I just wrote that, it doesn't matter if they already put it out there. And it does happen. Back to the example of my sister writing about farming. She's like, yeah, people have been writing about this for a long time. There's a lot of stuff that, I write it. I'm totally making it up as I go. And turns out it's already been published. So I got to change it. So when we do the plagiarism check, sometimes you're completely unaware that it's already published, written that way, etc. Sometimes people are pulling from something. They think, oh, that's okay. No. So the plagiarism check helps you, especially if you're going to self-publish. This is really smart. A publisher is going to do it anyway because the liability factor for you yourself when you're self-publishing, it's important to know. So that original content, big difference there. All right. Valuable content. In other words, if somebody starts reading it and the whole story's about, oh, sad, oh, woe is me, and that kind of thing, you're going to lose them. Give them a reason to keep reading. What are they going to get out of this? So them knowing that there's value here, it's engaging to them, etc. You want it to be, as we mentioned, original, well written, so that when they're reading it, it draws them in, they're learning from it, etc. And you want to be consistent with your formatting. So Beth, yes, authenticate.com is the one that I use. I know there are other ones as well. So yeah, I see your question in there. And then of course, if you're publishing as part of a book or with others or using a publisher, etc., there's going to be a process that you're following. That's important to know as well. Okay, and I think we're getting your questions answered. Please, again, raise your hand, ask them, type them in. Ultimately, getting published is your motivation to do it, your commitment to it, the effort that you're going to put into it, and then following through. Resources for you. Here's a great one. You're a coach. If you're going to get yourself published, get a coach. There are coaches that work with people specifically to get published. Another great resource is all over the place. There are writing groups. These are people that get together. They're typically writing in different genres and topic areas, and they share their writing with each other and get feedback on it. So it's a great way to do it. Researching the different options, of course, the publishers that are available, researching pay to participate, researching in terms of blogs or easing articles, newspapers, etc. I'll give you an example. There is a website called Help a Reporter Out. It's HARO, Help a Reporter Out. And if you go researching, hey, I want to put it out in a magazine or something like that, those are people who are saying, hey, we're looking for content on this topic. And it gives you a chance to submit content on that topic. They'll have specific processes for that. The Coaching Perspectives book, to give you some of the details, and again, I know several of you have already done chapters, so if you have not yet done a chapter and you want to do it, we put it out every year. We have done 6 so far. I am in the final stages for this year's copy of Coaching Perspectives. So these are the books that would come out. What I can share with you is every book is completely unique and different. Every chapter is an individual read. And the bottom line is these are all people that now have their name on the cover of a book. And that's pretty exciting. Gives them something they can sell in the back of the room or on their website, etc. So that's a great thing. I am at the point where I've covered what I had prepared for you. I'd been hoping to have people live and talking as we went through. So I'm hoping some of you want to raise your hand and come on live and ask those questions or at least type them in. Let's hear what you want to hear. So what are your questions, everyone? And everybody's quiet right now. So, okay. Actually, I've got somebody that wrote a chapter that volunteered to come on live and share that experience with you. So let me bring Ellen on. I've got a couple of you here, actually. Let's see. Ellen, I unmuted you on my end, and you had yourself on mute as well. So I'm going to say click to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yay.
All right. So Ellen, talk about your experience writing for Coaching Perspectives.
I found the entire process fascinating, a truly educational process, and deeply rewarding. I am in Coaching Perspective 6. Yay! The best one yet, obviously.
Of course.
And
that's awesome.
Well, you know, all things considered, sure. But even you know, coming up with a title, you know, and what I wanted to write about, it turns out that there was somebody else who submitted a very similar proposal for their chapter. And I was more than happy to reconsider and go in a different direction. And I found that incredibly rewarding to go the second path, to take the second path. But the whole process, you know, thinking about it may seem daunting, but it's just like taking the class, you know, the certification program. It is very structured. It is well laid out. The timelines are very clear. And working with the other coaches on providing feedback for their chapters and then getting feedback from them on my chapter was very insightful for me. It provided an opportunity for me to offer my thoughts and, you know, do a little coaching, as it were, in how I responded and the feedback I gave. And then I got some very rewarding feedback from a couple of the coaches who read my chapter that really found powerful motivation in what I had written. And so that was incredibly rewarding for me.
Nice. Nice, nice. Thank you for sharing that, Ellen. Renee, if you want to come on live, raise your hand. Beth, if you want to share about guest blogging, Love to bring you on live as well. So if you'll either raise your hand or type a note in the question panel so I know it's okay to unmute you, I'll do that. So, okay, and that's okay if you don't want to. Got it. Believe we are complete in terms of what I have for you. Oh, Beth is saying, okay, so Beth is going to come on live and share about guest blogging. So Beth, I've got you unmuted on my end. Just unmute on your end by clicking on the picture of the microphone and you'll be live. There you go,
Okay,
Beth.
am I live now?
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm not used to technology, obviously. I just had a good time. I had an idea for a blog that was actually in my field of expertise, and Kathy actually helped me hone it to a more general level where it was more applicable to more people. So it helped me hit a wider range of people, which was kind of exciting. I never realized that some of the techniques that I use for like maybe a few sets of people could apply to so many.
Yeah. Yeah. And Beth, if I can build on what you're saying. So Beth does a lot of weight loss coaching and creating that change, changing habits, etc. You know, gosh, we're all changing habits, or most of us. So it was really something that reached her clients in other areas as well. And that was one thing that was great about it. So good. And Beth, thoughts on the tweaking of language and formatting it for a blog? What are your thoughts there?
It really opened my eyes actually to just how much I had relied on questions more so than coaching language. I think in my coaching, I steer heavily towards questioning, and I did that when I'm writing my book right now. It relies heavily on questioning, and when I was writing a blog, it was of course more informative. And when I was looking at the language of coaching, it tended to, for me, be a little bit more difficult to go towards, for the forward languages, because you're talking about weight loss and you're talking about things that you're trying to avoid sometimes. And so in other words, you have to try to reframe it as something you want to go towards instead of something you want to avoid.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Beth. So she brings up a good point. The questions and coaching questions and using those are great in a workbook. So for example, we've even had chapters in Coaching Perspectives where they say part of this is designed to be a workbook for you. They do their writing, they provide the content, and then they'll say, okay, now for self-reflection, answer these questions, write out your answers, etc., and turn it into that workbook format. The other piece of it is that forward language. So when you're putting yourself out there and demonstrating your expertise and credibility, if you're using the negative moving away from language, are you demonstrating the credibility and expertise that you want to demonstrate? My favorite example with this is when the ICF updated their code of ethics back in 2015, in the summer of 2015, they intentionally rewrote it to use coaching language so that it was the positive moving toward. I'm currently on a committee for coach training schools, and we're doing the same thing. We're updating the code of ethics, and we're using that forward-focused language. So it's that powerful and that significant. Think about that when you're writing. Use your coaching language and your coaching questions. Excellent. What else, everyone? Okay, so based on not seeing any hands and not seeing any more questions in the question panel, it seems we're complete. I'm going to say thank you all for being here. Great having you here. Great conversation. Do let us know what we can do to further support you. One great closing comment just came in. This is great. Just write. Don't judge yourself. Plenty of time to edit later. So really nice comment. Excellent. Glad it was helpful. Thanks for those comments in there, everyone. Have a fabulous weekend, and we look forward to hearing about your success getting published, and look forward to seeing your publications so we in turn can tweet about them, etc. So thanks, everyone.